Hello, Year 6. We're on to chapter 21 now. Outplayed? Are you a gambler or something? The card lay on the table between them, face up in clear plastic. Calvin Redfern had explained that the bag was used for protecting items that might be needed as evidence in a court of law. Laura wanted to turn it over so that she no longer had to look at the Joker's foolish grin, but she didn't dare. "It means I've been outmaneuvered," Calvin Redfern said. "The Joker is the calling card of the gang. They leave it when they've committed a crime they think they've got away with. It's their way of laughing at the police, me in particular. When I left Scotland almost a year ago, I told no one where I was going. As I explained to you, I simply fled with no thought of where I might end up. I believed I'd put the past behind me, but the Straight A's never forgive or forget. They followed me here to seek revenge. The only reason they've delivered a card to my doorstep is they've either committed a crime in St. Ives or are about to get their own back on me in some way. Or both." He began pacing the kitchen. "What's taking the pizza man so long?" Lottie and Skye, warming themselves in front of the Aga, turned their heads to watch him. He returned to the table. "Laura, there's something I haven't exactly been honest about. I told you I was done trying to bring the Straight A's to justice, and for a long time that was true. But the week before you came to live in St. Ives, I spotted a gang member I once jailed climbing into a car park outside the Seawind holiday apartments." "Opposite the North Star?" He stared at her in surprise. "Yes, but that's purely a coincidence. In any event, I was so committed to burying the past that I walked away without so much as noting down his number plate. As a police officer, you should learn to accept that even criminals take holidays. But I soon found that my old obsession had returned to haunt me. I became convinced the Straight A gang was operating in or around St. Ives, perhaps in the illegal fishing industry. Ever since then, I've spent hours, sometimes whole nights, combing every inch of the town and surrounding coastline in a bid to find what they've been up to. I found nothing. Not a trace of them." He banged his fist on the table. "And now this! Maybe it's like you said. The answer is right under your nose. Perhaps while you were trying to spy on them, they were spying on you." "Go on." She looked hard at the table. "Okay, now I have something to admit to you. I followed you the other night. It was wrong of me, I know, but you were being so mysterious. I had to find out what you were doing. I saw you nearly punch that reporter." Calvin Redfern groaned. "Oh, Laura, I'm sorry you had to witness that. No wonder you thought me a brute. For the record, that man has written some of the worst lies ever committed to print about me. Personally, I've never cared, but when he started bringing Jacqueline into it, I saw red." "It doesn't matter. But I wasn't the only one following you that night. Mrs. Webb was there too." He stared at her. "Mrs. Webb? Are you absolutely sure?" Laura nodded. "Recently she's been asking me loads of questions about where you go and who you see, and once I found her going through your papers." Unexpectedly, he laughed. "Mrs. Webb? Oh, of course! How could I have been so blind? Oh, how could I have overlooked something so obvious? Who better to spy on me than my own housekeeper? What fooled me is that most women members of the Straight A gang are as glamorous as the characters from a James Bond film. Mrs. Webb, as you know, is quite the opposite. But maybe she was the only one prepared to cook and clean." He smiled. "I must have frustrated the life out of her. Over the past year, I've walked dozens of miles in freezing weather, apparently without purpose, and the only information that could have been useful to them is what I keep on the memory stick in my wallet. No wonder she detested her job." Then he grew serious. "Laura, I'm not upset with you for following me, but you need to know that the straight A's are among the most cunning criminals in the business. The joker on our step is a sign that they're up to something terrible. Has anything out of the ordinary happened recently? Laura considered telling him about the messages in the bottle, but decided against it. She'd only get a lecture on the risks of replying to notes from strangers. Then she remembered something. Yes, Tarek has disappeared. Her uncle groaned. Oh, not that again, Laura. We have more urgent things to worry about. I know you might... I know, but you see, after Tarek ran away from Mrs. Mukhtar this morning, something weird happened. What was that? I thought I heard him calling my name when I was crossing the road to school. But when I turned around, he wasn't there. There was only a man getting into a black car. I saw the first 3 letters of the number plate. They were... Laura leapt to her feet. JKR. Joker! Oh, Uncle Calvin, the straight A's have kidnapped him, haven't they? He probably tried to shout to me as they grabbed him. We have to save him. Calvin Redfern straightened up. All at once, he was no longer her uncle, but the detective he'd once been, radiating strength and authority. Laura, we're going to do our best to help Tarek, but I need you to think clearly and not panic. There's no earthly reason why the straight A's would snatch your friend, but we can't rule anything out. Did you get a good look at this man? Can you describe him? Laura recalled a short, bald man, built like a wrestler. As far as she could remember, he'd been wearing a brown suit. That's Monk, her uncle said. That's his nickname, but trust me, he's quite the opposite. He's one of the straight A's henchmen, the one they call in when they need both muscle and brains in an operation. If the gang has kidnapped Tarek, this could get tricky. But try to remember that you only think you heard him call your name. You could be mistaken. I'm not, Laura said stubbornly. It was him, I'm sure of it. Can you recall any details about Tarek that might help us trace him? What do you know about him? Only that he's supposedly the son of Mrs. Mukhtar's sister who died in India. He doesn't speak English and was worked half to death in that store. Mrs. Crabtree is positive it was Tarek who was making the expensive tapestries they had hanging around the counter. Is she now? Said Calvin Redfern thoughtfully. But for once, he didn't dismiss their neighbour's comments. Laura, what made you suspect that Tarek might not be the Mukhtar's son? Does he speak the same language as them? Does he speak Hindi? I suppose so. He didn't say much to them, but he could understand them. I've spent some time in Southeast Asia and I know a little of the languages. Do you remember any specific words? Laura was getting quite impatient with all these questions. While they were chatting, the Mukhtars and this monk person might be sprinting Tarek away further and further. I don't think so. Oh, no, hold on. I wrote a word down once. I think it meant thank you. She ran up to her bedroom and returned with a scrap of paper on which she'd written Doonabad. Doonabad, read her uncle. Ah, I think you mean Dhanobad. It does indeed mean thank you, but in Bengali, not Hindi. If Mrs. Crabtree's right about him making the tapestries, it might mean that he's been brought here from Bangladesh as some sort of cheap labour. I haven't a clue what this has to do with the straight A's. Maybe nothing. But I do know we need to find Tarek urgently. He put a lead on Lottie. Laura, our phone might be tapped, so I'm going to speak to the police in person. I'd take you with me, but if the straight A's are prowling around the neighbourhood, you'll be much safer here. Under no circumstances are you to open the door while I'm gone. Stay in your room and keep Sky by your side. But what about the pizza? Said Laura. Am I allowed to open the door to the delivery man? But Calvin Redfern was already on his way out and didn't hear her. The door slammed shut and he and Lottie were gone.